In fall 2017, Takafumi visits a quiet Japanese hospital to see his uncle, Yusuke Shibazaki, who has just awakened from a 17-year coma. Though Takafumi expects his uncle to be disoriented, he's surprised to hear him speaking incomprehensibly. At first, Takafumi thinks his uncle has lost his mind. However, when he asks him to speak Japanese, his uncle realizes he's no longer in Grand Bahamel, the world where he had been trapped for 17 years. Fortunately, his uncle still remembers how to speak Japanese and properly introduces himself to Takafumi. A nurse soon comes to check on him, disregarding the strange things he's trying to tell her. After checking his temperature and condition, the nurse departs. Yusuke then turns to Takafumi and recognizes him as his sister's son. Takafumi maintains a serious expression and informs Yusuke that his mother, Yusuke's sister, is angry with him for his foolishness. Yusuke takes a moment to write some notes in a diary before continuing their conversation. To demonstrate that he truly lived in another world, Yusuke extends his arm toward a water bottle and begins reciting magical words to lift it. After several unsuccessful attempts, Yusuke finally speaks the correct incantation, causing the bottle and cup to levitate. Takafumi watches in amazement, now believing his uncle's story. Though Takafumi asks for more information, Yusuke is more concerned about whether Sega won the console war. Takafumi explains that Sony and Nintendo are the successful ones, not Sega, though this detail seems unimportant. Uncle Yusuke records his meeting with Takafumi in his diary using the Ikura's Kora spell. When Takafumi inquires about it, Yusuke explains how the Ikura's spell works. Then, Yusuke shows Takafumi a detailed vision of one of his strange memories, which disturbs Takafumi so much that he begs his uncle to erase it from his mind. Yusuke does so, and then spends the next week recovering in the hospital. After being discharged, Takafumi takes him home and begins posting videos of his uncle performing simple magic tricks on YouTube. They earn about 60 yen from these videos since, at that time, channels didn't need 0 subscribers and 0 watch hours to be monetized. After returning from grocery shopping one day, they discuss sharing the apartment, with Takafumi mentioning his room is unnecessarily large. Changing the subject, Takafumi asks if his uncle made any friends during his 17 years in the other world. Yusuke admits he spent all that time alone. Finding his uncle rather dull, Takafumi turns his attention to washing dishes. Yusuke then describes how hideous he appeared in the other world, where people hunted him down thinking he was an orc variant. Takafumi tells his uncle to stop talking about such nonsense while he's doing the dishes, but Yusuke continues anyway. He goes on to describe how he once saved a girl who didn't even thank him. As Takafumi imagines what this girl might have said to his uncle, he realizes she was probably a tsundere, someone who acts cold despite having warm feelings. He decides to keep this observation to himself to avoid hurting his uncle's feelings. Yusuke is excited to be back in the real world with internet and Wi-Fi access. However, when he reads the comments on his video, he encounters trolls for the first time, which unsettles him. This prompts him to want a mobile phone, but he insists on getting an outdated 2G flip phone. Despite Takafumi's attempts to explain why this isn't practical, his uncle remains adamant about wanting a button flip phone. This leads to a discussion about technological innovations, where Yusuke mentions creating something beneficial for the people in the other world. He tells Takafumi about making an endless water pot for a village suffering from drought. Using his Icarus magic spell, he shows Takafumi memories of what happened. Instead of being grateful, the villagers rejected him and tried to kill him for using magic. Just as they were about to burn him at the stake, the tsundere girl he mentioned earlier appears in the memory and saves him. While she distracts the villagers, Yusuke uses magic to free himself and flees, abandoning the woman who risked her life to save him. Takafumi realizes his uncle must have run away without pursuing a relationship with the girl. Though Yusuke acknowledges his foolishness, he quickly becomes distracted by an online phone auction that's ending soon. He wins the phone but faces expensive shipping costs. To avoid these fees, Yusuke goes out to the balcony and uses magic to fly directly to the country where the phone is being shipped from. Yusuke returns 30 minutes later with the item he bought for just 0 yen. After this, Takafumi has him retrieve other items from different sellers to avoid high shipping costs. While ordering rice from Amazon, Takafumi discovers the bizarre nature of his uncle's storage system, an interdimensional storage facility containing various gemstones, rings, and exotic swords. After realizing most gems and rings are worthless, Takafumi questions his uncle about a particular wedding ring he found in the storage. Yusuke explains it's just a ring he received from completing quests. He then asks Takafumi if he wants to discuss relationships. After some convincing, Takafumi asks about his uncle's first love. Yusuke only talks about female video game characters, which annoys Takafumi. When asked about real girls from the other world, Yusuke shows a memory of when he saved a girl and her brothers from a giant monster. Despite his heroics, they were terrified by his appearance and ended up throwing him off a cliff. Disturbed by this, Takafumi quickly ends the memory viewing. The memory continues to show how the tsundere girl, who had been following Yusuke, saved him again. That night, Yusuke successfully charmed the girl, making her blush by giving her a wedding ring. When Takafumi asks if his uncle took responsibility for the relationship, he learns that Yusuke foolishly took back the ring the next morning and sold it to repay the tsundere girl. After viewing these memories, they return to their usual antics, marking the beginning of what Takafumi considers his worst life experiences with his uncle. As Yusuke's YouTube views decline, he grows concerned about his income and suggests they reduce their expenses to save money. One rainy afternoon, he orders a Sega magazine, much to Takafumi's annoyance, to check historical game rankings. Expecting his favorite game, Guardian Heroes, to be ranked first, he's shocked to find it placed 197th. To express his frustration, he goes outside in the rain, suspends himself in midair, and surrounds himself with yellow lightning while screaming about his disappointment over the game's low ranking. After his childish outburst, Yusuke returns inside to continue discussing game rankings with Takafumi. His nephew tries to console him by mentioning another Saturn game that reached second place. Having calmed down, Yusuke recalls one of his RPG-like experiences from the other world and decides to show it to Takafumi. The first memory reveals how much people despised his uncle's appearance in that world. He was so unattractive that he made Shrek look like Elvis on his best day. After being beaten up in a new village, an elder took him to meet Mabel, guardian of the Ice Clan's God-freezing sword. Yusuke needed to complete a quest to obtain the sword and use it against the Blaze Dragon. He finds the beautiful but cold-hearted Mabel sitting on one of her ice blades. She tells him about the Pawa Pawa blossoms she longed to see with her mother's ghost. To complete the quest and unseal the sword, Yusuke must find a way to warm Mabel's frozen heart. Instead of helping Mabel, Yusuke foolishly decides to fight and defeat the dragon alone. Seeing this, Takafumi realizes his uncle's foolishness knows no bounds. He tries to explain to his uncle that he should have helped Mabel by getting her the Pawa Pawa blossoms, which would have given meaning to her life and her guardianship of the sword. But Yusuke didn't think this was necessary. After showing Takafumi how grateful the villagers were, he ends the memory viewing and returns to his usual antics. Just then, a package arrives, and Takafumi goes to collect it. It turns out to be a Sega Saturn console he ordered as an early birthday gift for his uncle. Though initially surprised by the choice of present, Yusuke soon becomes excited and starts playing some of the 20 games Takafumi included with the console. That evening, they go out to get dinner. While walking home from the convenience store, Yusuke starts talking about aliens invading Earth on New Year's Eve. When Takafumi asks about how his uncle spent New Year's Eve in the other world, his uncle begins speaking nonsense again, prompting Takafumi to politely tell him to be quiet. Back home, they chat about comics and games before Yusuke shows Takafumi how he spent his first New Year's Eve in the other world. Rather than joining the festivities, his uncle had spent the evening alone, sulking and going to bed early during a perfectly innocent celebration. Takafumi is disappointed, especially since he expected to hear about the Tsundere girl who usually follows his uncle around. Learning that nothing happened between them that night, Takafumi returns to playing Guardian Heroes with his uncle. During their gaming session, Yusuke remembers Mabel visiting him after he left the festival. When Takafumi asks to hear about it, Yusuke hesitates but eventually shows the memory. It reveals Mabel seeking advice from Yusuke because villagers considered her useless. Yusuke initially gives her some surprisingly profound and comforting words, making Takafumi proud of his uncle's wisdom. However, this pride quickly vanishes when his uncle's foolishness resurfaces. Instead of encouraging Mabel to open up and warm her heart, he advises her to remain isolated and introverted. Completely disappointed by his uncle's poor advice, Takafumi stops watching the memories and goes to make noodles. When he asks his uncle about his own New Year's Eve traditions, Yusuke mentions he mostly watched TV back then. The night ends with them chatting, eating noodles, and playing games until the new year arrives. A few days after New Year's, an attractive but awkward woman notices Yusuke talking to himself on Takafumi's street. As she's about to leave, Takafumi recognizes her as Fujimiya and calls out to her. She turns around and blushes deeply upon seeing him, suggesting she has romantic feelings for him. However, Takafumi only sees her as a friend, not as a potential romantic interest. They catch up on old times, and Takafumi invites her to his home to continue their conversation, but Fujimiya says she needs to drop something off at her house first. 30 minutes later, Fujimiya arrives at Takafumi's apartment and finds it empty. When she enters, she notices the place is deserted and somewhat messy. While she's getting comfortable, Yusuke suddenly appears on the balcony and attacks her, mistaking her for an enemy. Luckily, Takafumi arrives just in time to stop his uncle from erasing Fujimiya's memories. After this unusual introduction, Fujimiya discovers just how eccentric Takafumi's uncle really is. At first, Fujimiya thinks Takafumi is being manipulated by his uncle's strange behavior, but she soon realizes they're both equally eccentric. Yusuke notices how she refers to Takafumi and suspects she has feelings for his nephew. To test his theory, he starts rambling about a boring video game concept and almost brings up something about tsunderes, which somehow becomes a significant issue. Fujimiya tries to interrupt him, but Yusuke ignores her and continues his nonsensical story. By the time he finishes, Fujimiya is crying and feeling sympathy for the character. Takafumi has to bring her back to reality by explaining that his uncle was just describing a video game's plot. Before she can react, Yusuke reads her mind, leaving her stunned. She rushes to confront him about this ability, but Yusuke is distracted by a package delivery. Fujimiya then suggests to Takafumi that he should leave his uncle and spend time with her instead. However, Takafumi refuses, believing his uncle isn't yet capable of living independently. One day, Takafumi returns from grocery shopping to find an unexpected scene. The tsundere girl from his uncle's otherworld memories is patting Fujimiya's head. The sight leaves him speechless. The events leading up to this began about 75 minutes earlier, when Takafumi learned Fujimiya Fujimiya was planning to visit. He informs his uncle, who becomes very excited for Takafumi, despite knowing that Fujimiya had recently tried to separate them. They move on from this topic when Takafumi translates a YouTube policy update for his uncle. The new policy states that channels need at least 0 subscribers to earn money from ads, which means Yusuke can no longer earn revenue from his videos. While investigating the problem, Takafumi discovers his uncle has been responding to comments very inappropriately. This discovery infuriates him, and after venting his anger at his uncle, he tries to think of solutions. At this point, Yusuke brings up another story about encountering a mysterious sealed city during his 17 years in the other world. When Takafumi asks for more details, Yusuke begins sharing these memories. In the first memory, Yusuke is puzzled about why the village is sealed off. His tsundere stalker appears and calls him an orc for being too stupid to understand the obvious reason for the village's barrier. When locals begin to suspect Yusuke might be an orc, the tsundere girl intervenes to keep him out of trouble. They then discuss something about an ancient Chinese state called Chu. Takafumi interrupts the memory to ask if Chu exists in the other world too. Yusuke suggests it might be a translation issue, and after explaining the Japanese meaning, Takafumi realizes he's been misunderstanding things. The memory continues with Yusuke and his companion walking through the city, with her making comments about his unattractive appearance. They stop to examine a massive fruit that she identifies as an iqua from the south. She explains that the village's barrier exists to protect them from mythical beasts living in the western lands. As she praises the village's safety, Yusuke recklessly uses magic to destroy the barrier just to verify her claims. This action results in chaos throughout the town, as a cyclops and an army of mythical beasts approach to attack the village. In an attempt to protect the city, the tsundere girl decides to act as the first defender before the city's official defense forces arrive. She calls forth her sword, powers up her magic, and takes flight toward the monsters to defeat them, but not before speaking some tender words to her seemingly weak and unattractive companion. However, just as she attempts to pass through the city's outer limits, she collides with the barrier and finds herself in an embarrassing situation. It becomes apparent that Yusuke had already fixed the barrier well before she had considered fighting the creatures. After the barrier's restoration, the monsters retreat to their forest dwelling, and the citizens begin to question what caused the barrier's initial failure. Uncle reveals himself as the suspicious individual. While the people begin to investigate him as a potential traitor, the tsundere girl steps in and suggests that the barrier might have failed because of its aging design. The positive outcome is that everything is now functioning properly again. Uncle withdraws to a shadowy spot to reflect on his miserable existence. He questions the tsundere girl about her decision not to expose him. She responds by asking him to buy her dinner that evening, but surprisingly, he disappears in the middle of the night, assuming she was trying to deceive him. This behavior is typical of Uncle Yusuke. He then exits the memory sequence and continues typing intensely on his laptop. After completing his major plan, Uncle informs Taka that he simply requested his followers to subscribe to his channel to maintain his YouTube earnings. At first, Taka strongly disapproved, considering it rather pathetic. Nevertheless, within minutes, Yusuke attracts enough subscribers to surpass the 1,000 subscriber milestone, allowing him to continue generating income from YouTube. Taka's surprise is interrupted when his attention shifts to Fujimiya, who happens to be present at that moment. Fujimiya discovers her beloved collapsed on the floor, suffering from his distrust of the internet. Shortly after, Fujimiya and Yusuke sit down to discuss the household situation. Fujimiya attempts to hint that he should leave the house so Takafumi can live independently. She points out his unemployment status, hoping he'll understand the message and depart. However, Yusuke responds by mentioning his YouTube channel. When Fujimiya requests more information about it, Yusuke keeps the details confidential. He then suggests to Taka that they should let Fujimiya live with them. Taka firmly refuses this idea. He then receives a notification about a supermarket sale and leaves to shop for the discounted items. After Taka's departure, Yusuke asks Fujimiya to explain why she thinks Taka fails to notice her attractiveness. Fujimiya retorts that she won't share her life story with a worn-out uncle whose only life experience comes from video games. These words deeply wound Yusuke. He leaves the living room and retreats to a bedroom. Fujimiya, feeling remorseful about her harsh behavior, follows him to the room, only to find him transformed into the tsundere lady from the other world. Since Fujimiya doesn't recognize this persona, Yusuke successfully deceives her by claiming that the uncle is in the bathroom beyond that room and that she is a different person entirely. This creates an opportunity for Fujimiya to finally open up about events from their younger days. The conversation is interrupted when Taka returns and finds his uncle holding Fujimiya in a strange manner. He immediately recognizes the tsundere girl as his uncle and proceeds to prove to Fujimiya that it's just his uncle, assuming someone else's appearance. Takafumi then has his uncle record himself as the tsundere character while playing a video game. Fujimiya remains utterly confused by the entire situation. After filming and uploading the video, while waiting for views to accumulate, accumulate, Takafumi asks his uncle to search his memories for any recollections of Fujimiya from their younger days. The first memory his uncle retrieves shows Takafumi at his former school. When Fujimiya expresses disbelief about the magical memory retrieval, Taka and his uncle quickly convince her it's done through holographic technology. In the memory, an aggressive bully appears, harassing young Taka. When Fujimiya asks about the bully's identity, Taka reveals that's how he remembers her. Fujimiya is shocked to realize she had been such a bully since their middle school days. Following the memory playback, Taka teases Fujimiya. His uncle also learns from their interaction and realizes his past mistake of ignoring tsundere girls. When his uncle checks on the video's performance, he discovers that Takafumi only recorded him as the tsundere girl, completely omitting the gameplay footage. To make matters worse, the video goes viral. This exposes Uncle to the unsavory side of the internet, where people exploit themselves for views and money. Although Uncle loses pride in his new occupation, they at least enjoy a good meal with the earnings from the video. After their meal, Yusuke uses magic to display Taka's memories of Fujimiya on a holographic screen. One memory shows young Taka having his romance novel taken by two school bullies who mock him relentlessly. In this memory, Fujimiya appears and confronts the bullies, retrieving Taka's book and saving him from his tormentors. Fujimiya becomes disgusted and annoyed upon seeing how unfeminine she appears in Taka's memories. After the memory ends, she defends herself by explaining that she became much more feminine after middle school. To support her claim, she shows them an uninteresting photograph of herself with Taka. When Yusuke takes pictures of it with his flip phone, Fujimiya becomes alarmed. She offers to text or email him the photo instead, but Yusuke reveals his phone cannot make calls or send texts. Fujimiya then asks how they communicate when separated, to which Yusuke claims they use medieval flags. Finally giving up on the conversation, Fujimiya takes a drink of her coffee and is surprised by its excellent taste. When she asks Taka about the coffee's origin, he explains that he purchased premium coffee using birthday money given to him by his uncle. This revelation makes Fujimiya feel guilty about not giving him a birthday present. After some additional conversation, Fujimiya sends Taka a photograph from their middle school days as a birthday gift. Concerned about potential misunderstandings, Taka immediately looks up how to remove pictures from social media platforms. When Fujimiya questions his reaction, he explains his worries about the implications. Before the conversation can continue, Taka receives another sale notification and hurries to the convenience store. Once he leaves, Uncle points out to Fujimiya that her gesture was overshadowed by a simple store notification. Frustrated, Fujimiya stands up and hits the table, causing Yusuke to accidentally spill his coffee. Just before the hot coffee reaches her, Yusuke uses his powers to freeze both Fujimiya and the coffee mid-air. After apologizing for his clumsiness, he thaws her out. He then provides her with a towel and offers her use of the shower, making sure to leave the house to give her privacy. While taking a warm shower, Fujimiya contemplates borrowing some of Takafumi's clothes. After finishing her shower, she puts on one of his shirts. Unfortunately, Taka returns unexpectedly and, embarrassed by the situation, quickly retreats to his room in distress. Once composed, Fujimiya finds Takafumi still worried about the incident. She sits beside him and reassures him that she isn't upset about what happened. Admitting that she's flattered, he finds her appealing. Upon hearing this, Takafumi looks at her with new understanding and acknowledges his responsibility for the situation. The intimate moment is interrupted when Yusuke bursts in armed, thinking they were under attack. Taka quickly explains the situation and offers to have his memories of the evening erased. Fujimiya strongly objects to this idea, wanting Taka to preserve his memories of the moment. After some chaos, they all finally calm down and decide to share some beer. Yusuke first verifies Fujimiya's age to ensure she's old enough to drink. The conversation shifts to discussing Yusuke's age, with Fujimiya teasing him about being elderly. Living up to this image, Yusuke shares some sage drinking advice with them. Since both are of legal drinking age, Yusuke decides to share a memory of his first drinking experience in the other world. In this memory, the tsundere girl appears wearing a dazzling glitter dress, attempting to attract Oji-san's attention and possibly win his affection. However, Yusuke remains uninterested and tries to direct her to another table. Determined, the tsundere girl confronts him by slamming his table, demanding to know how he managed to repair the barrier with such ease. Instead of answering, Yusuke silences her with food while pleading with her to keep secret the fact that he was responsible for breaking the barrier initially. Though confused by this revelation, the tsundere girl agrees to maintain his secret. Instead of exposing him, she expresses curiosity about how he became so powerful. When Yusuke explains that he gained strength through daily solitary training, the tsundere girl asks him about his defeat of the giant venom dragon that saved her life 3 years ago during their first meeting. Yusuke casually admits he hadn't realized the monster's true strength. The tsundere girl becomes agitated, scolding him for his recklessness, but Yusuke manages to charm her during dinner, causing her to blush. She timidly asks if he rescues other girls in the same way he saved her. When Yusuke mentions Mabel and her Ice Clan sword, the tsundere girl argues that defeating the dragon would require sealing it with the ice sword. However, Yusuke proves he defeated the dragon without the ice sword by showing her a vial containing the dragon's blaze. He then returns to elaborating on the life advice advice he had given to Taka and Fujimiya earlier. They soon discover that his profound wisdom was actually just a quote from Tetris, much to their disappointment. Both Taka and Fujimiya feel let down by Yusuke's deception of both them and the tsundere girl. Yusuke gets up to play some games, leaving the two to continue watching the memories. As the evening progresses, the now intoxicated Yusuke uses the tsundere girl to help him get back to his room. Taka makes sure to prevent his uncle from sharing any inappropriate parts of this memory. The tsundere girl assists the drunk Yusuke in making it safely to his room. The tsundere girl, blinded by her affection, doesn't realize Yusuke's true intentions. Once safely inside, Yusuke simply thanks her for her help, leaves her outside, and goes to bed. Witnessing this, Taka and Fujimiya lose all respect for their uncle. After playing one multiplayer game, Uncle returns and fast-forwards the memory to the next morning. After watching a dull sequence of Uncle's mundane activities, the three decide to drink alcohol to relieve their stress. Upon his first drink, Uncle loses control and uses his magic to levitate all of them into the sky. They enjoy this aerial experience for over an hour. In another memory sequence, they witness Yusuke attempting to help a poisoned tsundere girl by removing poison arrows from her neck. As he moves to continue helping her, the tsundere girl suddenly knocks him unconscious and erases his memories. When they next encounter Uncle, they suspect that tsundere girl might have taken advantage of his unconscious state. This prompts Fujimiya to consider poisoning Takafumi so she can recreate the situation between herself and him. Fortunately, Yusuke refuses to help her with this dangerous plan. Uncle brings up their financial concerns, explaining that YouTube's reduced RPM for content creators is pushing him back into financial hardship. He urgently needs a solution. Fujimiya suggests he become a professional baseball player, proposing he use magic to enhance his pitching speed. Uncle declines, stating he doesn't want to diminish real baseball players' hard work by cheating with magic. This ethical stance impresses both young adults. However, he then ruins the moment by rambling about his elementary school days, making both Takafumi and Fujimiya cringe. 1 or 2 months later, in June, Uncle and his two companions discuss a time when he nearly faced assassination in the other world. When Taka and Fujimiya request more details, Uncle displays another memory on the screen, showing his encounter with a hooded figure after exploring a dangerous dungeon. Taka and Fujimiya recognize this figure as his longtime stalker. Within moments, the hooded figure attacks and pins him down. Uncle remains unfazed as he identifies the attacker as Mabel. When he questions her actions, she explains she feels worthless for failing to fulfill her life's purpose. Missing her sarcasm entirely, Uncle congratulates her on finding happiness in her new occupation. After he offers some comforting words, they reconcile with a kiss. The scene ends with Mabel breaking down in tears before collapsing, prompting Uncle to carry her back to his room in town. When Mabel awakens in Yusuke's bed after several hours, she shares her village story. The villagers had chopped down her treehouse for firewood, claiming she was no longer needed. They presented her with two options: find employment or become their pet. Mabel created her own third option by freezing the villagers' legs and fleeing. When Yusuke questions why she didn't simply choose to work, it becomes clear that Mabel was extremely lazy and lacked motivation even for simple tasks. Yusuke supports her decision, suggesting she could become an adventurer instead. After Mabel inquires about his occupation, Yusuke shares some of his survival tactics. He then asks about her god-freezing sword, suggesting she could make a living with it. Mabel expresses fear about using the sword, explaining that as its guardian, she would face consequences if caught using it. Yusuke offers friendly advice, leading Mabel to discuss breaking the ice seal on her heart to gain freedom of choice. He reassures her that being introverted is acceptable as long as she's happy. Subsequently, Yusuke unintentionally charms her with his sarcastic yet sweet remarks. He then reveals he placed a ring on her left ring finger while she slept. Mabel, interpreting this as a marriage proposal, attempts to return the ring, notably after her ice seal had already dissolved. Yusuke, refusing to accept rejection from someone he sees as merely scrawny, moves closer to her and speaks tenderly, causing Mabel's emotional defenses to crumble under his influence. Making the situation more awkward, Yusuke offers Mabel his room and bed for rest. When Mabel requests money for a bathhouse visit, explaining she hasn't bathed in a while, Yusuke surprisingly kneels down and sniffs her like a dog. He then suggests she sell the ring he gave her to pay for her bath. This insensitive comment causes Mabel's heart to refreeze and her ice seal to return. Enraged, she attacks Yusuke for his tactlessness. Although Yusuke manages to restrain her sword with chains, the commotion attracts the tsundere girl, who discovers him holding Mabel in what appears to be a compromising position. The tsundere girl becomes intensely jealous, suspecting Yusuke of inappropriate behavior. When he pleads for her help in restraining Mabel, she instead cuts the restraining chains, freeing Mabel, who promptly freezes Yusuke in a block of ice. Having seen enough of these memories, Taka and Fujimiya change the subject. Taka asks his uncle about his fastest completion time in an alien-themed video game. While Yusuke proudly shares his record, Takafumi checks online and discovers someone has significantly surpassed his uncle's record time. Despite being devastated, Unc quickly recovers and returns to his laptop to purchase more Sega games. They find some North American games that were poorly translated. While the boys are arguing, Fujimiya notices that the memory recap is still playing. She hears mentions of Japan Bahamel and immediately calls Taka to listen to Mabel's story. However, Tsundere Girl interrupts them and tries to convince Mabel to give up the ring. When Mabel refuses, Tsundere Girl stays calm and listens to Mabel tell the story of how her ancestor founded the Ice Clan. The story reveals that Bro died in a major battle in Japan Bahamut 400 years ago and was given a new life in Grand Bahamut. As Mabel continues her story, Tsundere Girl interrupts and finishes telling it herself. This causes Mabel to cry because she couldn't finish telling her own story. Tsundere Girl comforts Mabel, while Unk becomes angry because he didn't receive any special divine bonus when he was transported to that world. Taka helps him rewind his memory recap to the very beginning to check if he actually received a divine bonus. After viewing several memories of his near-death experiences, Unk finally reaches the beginning, just after his body was created in Grand Bahamut and left in the forest. The first people he encountered were terrorists who beat him severely. While reviewing these memories, Taka and Fuji notice that everything is playing in a different language. Taka translates the message and discovers that Unk had wished for the ability to translate their language to understand them better. This power proved useless since he was later sold to a freak show as a rare orc. At this point, Taka and Fujimiya decide they need coffee. They all head to the kitchen to make some good coffee to enjoy together. After their coffee break, they resume watching the memories. The scene shows the terrorists, who had beaten Yusuke badly, trying to sell him to a freak show manager as a rare orc. The manager offers only 3 copper coins for Unk. Surprisingly, when one of the bandits tries to sell a scouring pad, the manager offers 120 copper coins for it. This revelation shows Takafumi and Fujimiya how worthless Unk was in the old world, being worth less than a scouring pad. When Fujimiya asks Yusuke how he could forget such a humiliating memory, both he and Taka suddenly get nosebleeds. This appears to be a sign of recovering erased memories. To help Fujimiya understand better, they let her read the first page of Unk's diary. Upon reading it, she understands that forgotten memories can return under certain conditions. The group then continues watching what happened to Yusuke after being sold to the freak show. He was thrown into a basement pen with strange creatures and animals. Yusuke fast-forwards through a week because the manager had completely forgotten about him during that time. By the 7th day, Yusuke was losing his grip on reality, making bizarre references to video games that made no sense. When questioned about his mental state, he explains that he was talking to a single ray of moonlight shining into his cell to stay sane. After speaking nonsensically for a while, something strange occurs. Yusuke suddenly gains the ability to understand spirits and supernatural entities beyond human comprehension. The light spirit encourages Yusuke to approach the ray of light and speak into it. He performs his first magical chant and manages to create a lightsaber from the light beam. He uses this light sword to cut his way out of the cell. Fujimiya and Takafumi realize that Yusuke had magical powers all along, the ability to understand and communicate with spirits. This proves that his translation power wasn't useless after all. Surprisingly, even Yusuke himself didn't know this was his special ability. After freeing himself, Yusuke proceeds to release all the other trapped creatures from their cells. He leaves with a pet rabbit on his shoulder, but moments later, all the freed animals turn hostile and attack him. Both Yusuke and another random person get bitten all over their bodies. Just as Yusuke is about to lose consciousness, his magical powers activate again, making him stronger. He quickly defeats the first group of monsters and sends his injured companion to the hospital. Then, he faces the remaining creatures and eliminates all of them by morning. Afterward, Yusuke cooks and eats the monster meat to regain his strength. While watching this part of his life, Fujimiya remembers she might miss having fried chicken at home and prepares to leave. However, when Unk starts talking about how he saved the elf Tsundere girl from a dragon only to be scolded afterward, Fujimiya decides to skip her fried chicken and stay to watch this part of Unk's story. On the 9th day, Bro defeats the Venom Dragon with a single hit to save Elf, Tsundere girl, who is half naked and about to become dragon food. After this impressive feat, instead of being grateful, Tsundere girl becomes angry at the ugly orc who gave her his hoodie to keep warm. Rather than thanking him, she stands up holding a knife while making threatening remarks. When Yusuke questions her about the knife, she apologizes and puts it away in her dimensional storage through her stomach. Unk, misunderstanding this action, thinks she has stabbed herself. Worried, he lifts his hoodie off her to check for wounds, exposing her slim body. Though Tsundere girl is embarrassed, Unk continues checking intimate areas for injuries. Finally, Tsundere girl insults him and vows to settle the score with him someday. Unk remains silent as Tsundere girl runs away with his hoodie, ending their encounter. The scene then jumps to dawn the next day, after he was frozen. Early in the morning, he wakes to find Mabel and Tsundere girl sleeping at his feet. When he speaks up, Tsundere girl wakes first. When he asks why she's sleeping so close to him, she gives him a false explanation. Too tired to argue, Unk allows her to do as she pleases as long as he can get some good sleep. Moments later, Mabel moves to Unk's chest and starts sleep talking about work, which annoys everyone. Tsundere girl wakes her with a slap and reminds her of what she said while sleeping. When Mabel complains about needing work, Unk suggests she sell the ring he gave her. Tsundere girl supports this idea, hoping Mabel will get rid of the ring. After some argument, Mabel agrees to let Tsundere girl take care of her until she finds a job and becomes independent. Unk treats them to breakfast afterward. They introduce themselves, Mabel as the Ice Clan guardian, and Elf as an ancient artifacts researcher. Unk lies and introduces himself as Wolf Gunblood, which startles both girls. After breakfast, Tsundere girl prepares to buy back her ring from the pawn shop, though she keeps this from Unk by changing changing the subject to legendary heroes who defeated Legion-class beasts alone. Unk plans to investigate these heroes after eating. Mabel decides to go with Unk, but wants to take a nap first. With little time to spare, they all separate to handle their own business. After watching another boring memory recap, Yusuke treats everyone to ramen. However, he runs out of money and Fujimiya has to cover the remaining bill to avoid trouble. Despite this, they all enjoy a wonderful evening before heading home. A few days later, Unk shows another memory of his time with Tsundere girl after escaping a terrible event. That morning, he sees her playing with her forehead protector gem while getting out of bed and asks for his hoodie back, the same one she's kept for about 3 years. Tsundere girl firmly refuses to return it. Unwilling to give up his precious hoodie, Unk creates magical chains to bind her and tries to take the hoodie off in broad daylight. Tsundere girl cleverly convinces him to release the chains so he can remove them more easily. As soon as he does, she knocks him unconscious. Though she thought it was just a light punch, she realizes she hit him too hard and leaves him lying on the floor. After showing Takafumi how his foolishness led to this situation, Unk stops the memory recap and discusses some strange clothing in his inventory. Takafumi suggests they need a girl to try on the clothes, so they wait for Fujimiya to return. When she arrives, they ask her to try on Tsundere girl's green glitter dress. Fujimiya likes the dress, finding it very beautiful on her, and Takafumi agrees. Unk initiates a vote to name his mysterious translation ability that he received when he entered the other world. After a silly voting process, they decide to call it the Wild Talker. They then begin discussing how to activate this technique. At this point, Fujimiya receives a notification about something she needs to do at college and leaves with her bag. About an hour later, Takafumi and Unk start playing games. During a break, Unk suddenly wants to show Taka his memories of 3 heroes during a goblin fighting mission. In the memory, 3 heroes, led by a girl named Alicia, attack Unk because they mistake him for a goblin. He has to fight them before they become friends. The other heroes are Edgar and Raiga, both very protective of their heroic sister Alicia. After introductions, Alicia suggests working together. She invites Unk to join their mission to eliminate a goblin horde threatening a village, which he casually accepts. Though surprised, the group allows him to join them. They journey for several hours until they reach the goblin horde near a ravine. Unk takes the lead and uses some questionable strategies before ultimately defeating all the goblins using wind magic. This impressive display earns him the respect of the 3 heroes, who let him travel with them that night. During their journey, Alicia pulls Unk aside from the others and reveals that she knows he rebuilt the barrier in the sealed city. When Unk asks if she's told anyone else, she says no. Fearing exposure, he erases all 3 heroes' memories of him and flees, thinking he'll never encounter them again. However, he does meet them again in the grassy meadows, where they attack him, again mistaking him for an orc. Unk easily defends himself and introduces himself once more, this time as Kuroki Tenma, and listens to their situation. They explain they're trying to defeat a monster that's made its nest in an old shrine. The monster is too powerful, so these struggling heroes seek help. When Unk asks about the monster, they describe it as a giant hedgehog. Since Sonic the Hedgehog is his favorite Sega game character, Unk feels sympathy for the creature and decides to communicate with it to understand why it's attacking people. When the giant hedgehog appears to confront Unk, he's disappointed because it looks nothing like Sonic. Though it's just a normal hedgehog, Unk's complete lack of real-world experience makes him expect all hedgehogs to look like Sonic. Nevertheless, Unk manages to speak with the giant monster in its language. He learns that the monster doesn't even like eating humans but simply enjoys killing them for entertainment. After hearing about the situation, Unk transforms the giant into a large crispy piece of meat and continues walking as if nothing extraordinary happened. During the next round of discussions, Fujimiya's phone rings, and Taka quickly answers it. He discovers she accidentally left her phone behind and feels compelled to return it. He explains the circumstances to Unk, who eventually lifts them into the sky and flies them to Fujimiya's college. Upon arrival, Takafumi notices an unappealing guy hanging around Fujimiya, which immediately triggers his jealousy. Fujimiya's facial expression clearly indicates she's uncomfortable with the guy's presence. Taka decides to investigate, but before he leaves, Unk grants him magical abilities that will last for an hour. Taka expresses gratitude and proceeds forward. Meanwhile, Fujimiya attempts to distance herself from the bothersome individual when Takafumi suddenly appears and starts questioning the situation. He returns her phone and observes the guy, recognizing him as Chiaki, the cute kid from his past who used to constantly follow him around. Despite Chiaki now being a delinquent, Takafumi remains unbothered and instead chooses to befriend him. Unk arrives shortly after and feels relieved that everything seems fine. Upon learning that Chiaki is a YouTuber, Unk decides to connect with him. He introduces himself in an awkwardly enthusiastic manner and becomes highly offended when Chiaki admits he hasn't heard of Unk before. Unk becomes agitated and begins elaborately explaining every detail of his job to the disinterested individual. Simultaneously, Taka and Fujimiya engage engage in a conversation about her romantic interests. Taka brings up the possibility of Chiaki being Fujimiya's boyfriend, but Fujimiya quickly dismisses such a notion, making it clear that such a weirdo could never be her boyfriend. They continue listening to both individuals' conversation when Takafumi suddenly decides to demonstrate some of the magic Unk lent him earlier. Prior to this, Fuji had asked if he could protect her from potential harassment. Taka uses his magical abilities to fly both himself and Fuji onto a high balcony. He then proceeds to explain the intricacies and mistakes of his magical performance, taking his time until Fujimiya becomes impatient and tells him to stop talking. They move to an empty classroom to discuss an incident from their younger years. Initially, Taka believed he had intervened to save Fujimiya from bullies, but upon watching the full video, they discovered that Fujimiya was actually the one doing the bullying. Despite this revelation, Fujimiya remained grateful that Taka had always been there for her when she needed him most. After watching the video, she gives Taka a nice smile that makes him blush bright red. Shortly after, Fujimiya's college friend arrives and meets Taka. Following their initial pleasantries, she warns Taka to make his move quickly or risk losing Fujimiya to other college boys. Taka goes on a rant about destroying all potential rivals, but then receives a call. The friend realizes she needs to take her younger brother, Chiaki, home. She does so and returns to Taka's house. At Taka's house, the trio engages in random conversations. Eventually, they settle down to watch another flashback from Yusuke's memories. In this memory, Yusuke is searching for a specific hero, only to have Alicia claim the title and introduce herself as a low-quality, classless act hero. Following her poor performance, Alicia is reprimanded by her brothers for using Edgar's new sword during her questionable act. The blade is now chipped and rendered ineffective. Alicia prostrates herself on the ground, apologizing to Edgar before explaining the situation to a bewildered Unk. It turns out they've only been adventuring for 6 months and aren't yet experienced enough to be called true heroes. To verify her story, Yusuke intrudes on her memories without consent. He discovers a rotund millennial who refers to himself as a bishop, having granted them the hero title simply for eliminating a horde of goblins. Something strikes Yusuke as suspicious, and he resolves to investigate further. Before departing, Alicia calls him back and reminds him of a secret. Unk was prepared to erase her memories once again, but this time he refrains because Alicia promises to keep the secret. Shortly after, Unk decides to gain some adventure experience with the three companions. After traveling for a considerable time, they finally arrive at the Labyrinth of Darkness, an A-rank labyrinth, with the intention of exploring it. To understand the labyrinth's significance, Unk employs Ikuras Elrond magic to retrieve a memory recap. Through this, he uncovers the true objective of their entire journey, finding the Wand of Salvation. Before starting their quest, the trio engages in some playful activities. Once they're finished, they enter the labyrinth in search of the wand. After walking for a few minutes, Unk discovers a shortcut and guides his companions through it. Within a short time, they obtain the wand, but feel strangely unfulfilled by their easy success. Yusuke observes their lack of satisfaction and decides to erase their memories. He then leads them through the standard route, allowing them to clear the dungeon conventionally and experience genuine accomplishment. Careful to maintain their sense of achievement, Yusuke also erases any trace of his own involvement from their memories. After completing this, he departs for the capital to handle some business. Regarding the quest's reward, Unk postpones collection for a later time. He receives a few healing spell cards from Alicia and continues on his way. Taka and Fujimiya pause their viewing to commend Unk's coolness in that particular scene. They then take a break, enjoying refreshing drinks while complaining about the intense heat outside. The trio spends a few minutes discussing fans and air conditioning, throwing in some absurd comments along the way. Eventually, they move on to examine another of Unk's memories. In this memory, Unk investigates the memories of a national knight. It becomes apparent that Bishop Zernigan is responsible for ordaining the three as heroes. Sensing something suspicious about this arrangement, Unk decides to visit the bishop at his secret meeting location. After obtaining the bishop's location, Yusuke teleports to the capital and heads to the central command post. Just before his arrival, Bishop Zernigan, Royal Army Commander Ricardo Markfeld, and his assistant Miller are discussing their plan to use the three heroes as puppets to create chaos and line their own pockets through war. Having overheard enough, Yusuke makes his appearance and summons a memory recap screen from Ricardo's mind, allowing everyone to witness his recent scheming with Miller. After viewing the recap, Ricardo attempts to defend himself with a flimsy explanation, claiming he was merely trying to help the young heroes improve their professional skills. Yusuke remains unconvinced by Ricardo's justification and condemns his actions. Taka, listening to the unfolding situation, becomes excited and eagerly anticipates Ricardo receiving his comeuppance. However, his hopes are dashed when Ricardo uses his intimidating corporate presence to suppress Yusuke's defense. Undeterred, Yusuke decides to change the confrontation by transforming into the most powerful life form he knows, his obese middle school homeroom teacher. In this form, he proceeds to slap Ricardo soundly, ultimately forcing him into silence. Shortly after, Ricardo's assistant arrives to defend her boss. She receives her own share of slaps, which effectively resets her mental state and keeps her quiet for a while. Soon after, Ricardo speaks up, complaining about the intruder disrupting the natural order of their world by destroying their most mythical beasts. As the discussion continues, Mabel bursts into the castle with her icy cold powers, prepared to confront the perpetrator. Upon discovering the intruder is Unk, she immediately softens softens and begs him to leave. To fool the soldiers in the room, Mabel and Unk create an illusion of an intense fight, allowing them to quietly retreat to a corner and secretly cheer on the soldiers. With the soldiers completely deceived, Mabel experiences an ego boost and boasts about her seemingly pointless job, making it appear as though Unk is wasting his time wandering the earth. She reveals that Ricardo discovered her wandering aimlessly in the woods and offered her a job after witnessing her abilities. This narrative continues for several minutes until Mabel pleads with Unk to deliberately lose the illusory fight to maintain the impression that she's performing her job effectively. Hearing her request, Unk moves uncomfortably close to her, making provocative comments that cause her to blush bright red. Ricardo eventually discovers their deception and calls out Mabel as a useless spy, incapable of performing her job properly. This accusation infuriates Mabel so intensely that she suddenly attacks Unk. Naturally, Unk blocks her attacks and defeats her, but not before she kills approximately a dozen Royal Army soldiers. After subduing her, Yusuke discovers that Mabel had been under the bishop's control the entire time. The bishop was manipulating her using holy magic, pulling strings from behind the scenes. Zernigan attempts to justify his actions, but Yusuke effectively talks sense into their stubborn minds. Yusuke then leaves Ricardo's men to advocate for peace. Initially, Ricardo shows no interest in peace. However, after further persuasion, he ultimately yields to his men's demands. The bishop becomes distressed, worrying about the country's financial stability without military funding. Yusuke, known as Wolf Gunblood, tells them to call on him whenever they're under attack, promising to come to their rescue. To demonstrate his claimed strength, he transforms into a blazing dragon, delivers a final message, and then soars into the skies, disappearing from view. Taka and Fujimiya praise Unk for his coolness, soon learning that Mabel was fired shortly after these events. They pause the memory recap and notice scales developing on Takafumi's skin. Upon closer examination, they realize these scales are a consequence of him overusing abbreviated spell versions. To support Takafumi, Unk transforms into a dinosaur, joining his nephew in roaring at the skies and terrifying a helpless Fujimiya. Fortunately, they manage to return to their original forms, narrowly avoiding permanent transformation into animals. Time passes, and by August 2018, Japan experiences record-breaking heat waves. The temperature is so extreme that Unk's Sega game console begins to malfunction. Yusuke becomes so frustrated that he decides to open the CPU and attempt repairs himself. Fujimiya arrives wearing a summer dress and brings the boys some ice cream. While cooling the freshly purchased fish in the refrigerator, she suggests that Yusuke use his ice magic to cool the room since they lack air conditioning. This prompts a sudden epiphany for Yusuke, who immediately freezes the entire room with his life-saving ice magic. Fujimiya questions why it took them so long to realize such an obvious solution. Yusuke explains that they had just spent an hour in dragon form, and had they remained transformed, they might have lost the ability to learn anything meaningful. She then proposes buying an air conditioner, but the boys are completely broke. They begin brainstorming ways to earn money, with Fujimiya suggesting they post some of Unk's memories on YouTube to generate views and income. Taka strongly opposes this idea. To illustrate why, he asks Unk to project his brain thoughts onto a screen. Yusuke complies, and they all witness just how terrible the idea truly is. Desperate for a better solution, they urgently seek inspiration from the spirits. Fuji asks Unk to describe the spirits, hoping to hear about beautiful beings. Instead, Unk describes them as abstract wills and concepts of life, shocking his audience. Taka becomes concerned about Unk's mental state, but Unk demonstrates he has just the right amount of sanity to handle these spiritual entities. Unk receives a message from the ice spirit demanding a cowhead as compensation for cooling the room. Upon checking the price, they discover it's 5 million yen, completely unaffordable. Taka and Fujimiya inquire about the consequences of not building the altar. Unk explains that the ice spirit would freeze the earth for 10 years, terrifying the children. As he prepares to cook the fish, Unk receives another call from the ice spirit, this time requesting the fish head instead. The kids question why spirits are so inconsiderate of humans. Unk explains that spirits view all creatures as a single, uniform organism. He rambles about some Sega game-related details, and eventually discusses their dragon experience. One thing leads to another, and they prepare to watch another memory recap. This time, the recap focuses on how Unk nearly became permanently trapped as a blazing dragon after maintaining that form for just 1 month. However, he quickly realizes how terrible an idea it was. Just before becoming permanently stuck as a dragon, Tsundere Girl arrives to bring him back to his senses. Taka and Fujimiya are thrilled to finally see a familiar face after many years. The battle commences, with Tsundere Girl standing firm against the formidable dragon. Taka becomes excited, imagining how entertaining the confrontation must have been. Unfortunately, the battle is short-lived, lasting only 10 minutes before Tsundere Girl defeats Unk. She remains with him until twilight. A group of scalawags to whom she owes money then appears, seeking the orc she recently captured. Their leader offers her a choice: release the orc and consider her debt settled, or risk death by fighting. Tsundere Girl maintains a brave facade, calling the company president a brainless oaf for pursuing debtors in such a manner. Instead of taking offense, the company leader encourages his men to mock Tsundere girl for being a moneyless princess. This revelation surprises Taka and Fujimiya, who were unaware of her royal status. They criticize Unk for not recognizing or sharing this information earlier. As the situation escalates, Tsundere girl prepares to draw her sword. However, just as she's about to engage, her non-aggression contract takes effect. The leader, Hagen, begins to spout nonsensical remarks, interrupting her potential attack. Before Hagen can finish his nonsensical ranting, Unk rises and destroys the contract using dark magic. He then thanks Tsundere girl for helping with his dragon problem, considering his debt repaid since he saved her from the contract. Immediately, Tsundere girl clings to him, begging him not to leave her with those men. Unk mentions he needs to take a bath, but Tsundere girl insists he smells fine. Their playful banter continues as Hagen throws a childish tantrum, reminiscent of a kid who lost his candy. Frustrated, Hagen calls upon Doldor, a giant hunter, to teach Tsundere girl a lesson. He provides Doldor ample space to confront the elf girl. Just as the fight is about to commence, Unk dramatically intervenes by giving Hagen a ring and proposing to him in front of the entire army. This unexpected move enrages Tsundere girl so intensely that she emits an aura, causing the earth to collapse beneath them. Unk ultimately manages to pull her into the muddy swamp below. Hagen decides to abandon the scene and leave with his men to enjoy their lives. Meanwhile, Unk and his girlfriend engage in a conversation about precious metals, continuing their adorable argument and exchanging sweet comments. They then begin their journey to the hot springs in the north to get cleaned up. During their journey, Tsundere girl inquires about Unk's obsession with cleanliness. Unk provides a ridiculous explanation that ends up irritating both kids. They soon notice the room's temperature has dropped to 10 degrees, which is dangerously cold for survival. UNC turns off the ice spell and huddles under a blanket with the children until the temperature normalizes. After enduring a barrage of complaints, UNC eventually summons a darkness blade to cut the signal and Wi-Fi. Moving forward, Unk begins discussing an infrared port, but the kids merely laugh, explaining that it's now called Bluetooth and is far superior to infrared. They spend the remainder of the day under the blankets, emerging only when conditions return to normal. During their next memory recap, they witness Unk investigating a stomach parasite incident in the city. He quickly returns home to check on Mabel's health, lifting her dress to confirm she's okay. He then proceeds to examine Tsundere girl by pulling down her drawers, resulting in her disciplining him. However, Tsundere girl's anger turns to sympathy when the stomach parasite begins attacking Unk. They abruptly stop the video and decide to have pizza for dinner. A few days later, Sawa, Fujimiya's friend, visits Takafumi's residence intending to rescue her friend from the eccentric uncle and his nephew. Shortly after her arrival, Chiaki also drops by. He attempts to harass Sawa, but Taka quickly intervenes, escorting them to his room before any further trouble can occur. Upon entering the room, Fujimiya greets her friend with a sardonic welcome to hell and inquires about the purpose of her visit. Sawa embraces her friend and desperately begs her to escape from the House of Creeps before something terrible happens. Chiaki asks about Unk's whereabouts, and Taka informs him that Unk has just stepped out. The girls join them in the living room, where they discover an extremely ugly and disgusting fish head positioned near the TV. Sawa becomes terrified, and upon overhearing Fujimiya and Taka discussing bizarre magical terminology, she decides it's time to leave. Just as they approach the door, Unk enters the house and gives Sawa an intimidating stare. By this point, Sawa becomes convinced that Unk is conducting cult meetings in his home. Yusuke bursts into laughter, telling Sawa not to believe everything posted on YouTube. He then casually walks away, leaving Sawa with Fujimiya. The two girls proceed to discuss Takafumi and his peculiar uncle. Ultimately, Sawa comprehends why Fujimiya enjoys spending time at Takafumi's place. She genuinely likes him and has no intention of letting him go. Sawa requests coffee, and during Fujimiya's absence, she decides to test Takafumi's character by showing him some suggestive photos of herself and her friend, hoping to expose his potentially perverted nature. When Sawa hands him her phone, Takafumi surprisingly focuses on finding males in the photos and asks detailed questions about any men he discovers. Sawa observes Taka's intense protectiveness towards Fujimiya and sighs with relief. She then inquires about Taka's earlier years with Fujimiya. Taka describes young Fujimiya as a bully who closely resembles Chiaki in behavior and appearance. Around this time, Chiaki reappears and again attempts to harass Sawa. Fujimiya returns with coffee, simultaneously irritating everyone with her cringeworthy affection for Takafumi. Unk arrives and projects a memory recap screen to showcase Fujimiya's younger self. Sawa becomes confused and questions Unk's actions. To prevent potential memory-related complications, Unk prepares to erase their memories. However, Taka and Fujimiya quickly react by throwing their guests out of the house, saving them from Unk's terrifying magical intervention. Afterward, they settle down to relax and engage in more casual conversation. Unk spontaneously begins discussing a hot spring bath from another world. The two children become excited and eager to watch the memory, so Unk sits them down and sets up the memory recap screen. Initially, they are subjected to watching Unk's peculiar groaning. After 20 minutes, they fast-forward the playback, pausing when Unk encounters a yukata. Finding this context unclear, the kids have Unk rewind the footage until they reach his time alone with Tsundere girl. It was already dark, and they were arriving at an inn to use their hot spring. Before reaching the inn, Ankh comforts Tsundere girl, telling her not to feel bad about her royal status. He emphasizes that being true to herself is what matters most. Touched by his words, Tsundere girl blushes as they approach the inn's gates. Upon arrival, Yusuke notices the inn's gate is written in Japanese. Tsundere girl then reveals an intriguing story about a man from another world who mysteriously appeared, lived for 8 days, and passed away at the age of 88. Ankh reads the sign as Purgatory Springs and proceeds to explain the concept of purgatory to Tsundere girl. Just then, a strange man appears to welcome them to the springs. Before admitting them, the man takes time to explain the inn's origins. He reveals that his master's body and clothes mysteriously vanished after death, leaving behind the skills and carpentry materials needed to complete the structure quickly. During their discussion, Ankh busies himself sorting materials, largely ignoring the conversation around him. After concluding their discussion, the man allows them to enter. In the initial few minutes, Ankh manages to frighten everyone away. Fortunately, nobody attacks them, and they successfully reach the administration building intact. After checking into the inn, Ankh enjoys a 20-minute soak, which the viewers fast forward until reaching the yukata scene. It turns out the yukata-clad girl is simply Tsundere girl wearing a kimono. She guides Yusuke to the single room she's secured and spends considerable time explaining why they must share the room. After an extended, somewhat chaotic argument involving Ankh and the room assignment, he finally agrees to stay in the same room as Tsundere girl. Upon entering their room, Ankh takes his mat bed and retreats to a tiny closet space to relax. Tsundere girl feels disappointed by Ankh's persistently difficult behavior, unaware of what unexpected events might follow. Just as Tsundere girl prepares for bed, Ankh creeps up behind her and provides a nerve-soothing massage, which she largely enjoys. Ankh's subsequent antics lead him to approach a metaphorical Ferris wheel of fortune, but Tsundere girl isn't prepared for such advances. She responds by tickling him mercilessly, reducing him to uncontrollable laughter. For a brief moment, their eyes lock, and the tension between them intensifies. Taka pauses the transmission to ensure nothing inappropriate occurs. Once satisfied, he allows the video playback to continue. It's revealed that Alicia and her brothers have been eavesdropping behind the door. Ankh exposes them and begins asking investigative questions. Tsundere girl befriends Alicia after hearing about her relationship with Ankh. Meanwhile, the brothers present Ankh with his share of the hedgehog mission, becoming irritated when he accepts the gift without further inquiry. Their conversation continues until Tsundere girl demonstrates her jealousy when other busty women are near Yusuke. After ensuring Yusuke's attention remains on her, she attempts to pair herself with one of the 2 boys accompanying her. Fortunately, the boys resist her advances and reject her. Their focus then shifts to the wand of salvation. Tsundere girl becomes disappointed upon discovering Alicia has merely painted the wand to appear beautiful. Ankh disregards the girls and instead asks the boys to reveal their deadliest techniques. When they refuse, he uses his Icarus Elron magic on Alicia to access their skills through her memory. Tsundere girl spots the scabbard she's been searching for and inquires about its location. After obtaining the necessary information, she quickly suits up, says her goodbyes, and rushes to retrieve the ancient artifact. Moments after her departure, Alicia expresses concern to Kuroki, Yusuke, about Tsundere girl's safety. Yusuke assures her that Tsundere girl will be fine and that the inn should now be safe from attacks. However, in that same instant, they turn to find the inn engulfed in purgatory-like flames, with a monster attacking the premises right before their eyes. After witnessing the Hypno monster's capabilities, they rushed back to the inn to defeat it. They soon discovered anti-magic birds circling the inn's skies, preventing Yusuke from using magic. Edgar and his companion would need to hold off the Hypno monster, while Yusuke found a way to deal with the troublesome anti-magic birds. Taka and Fujimiya inquire how Ankh survived the entire ordeal. Ankh claims he did everything in his power to keep up. Edgar and his brother express satisfaction that their training to catch up to their mentor wouldn't go to waste. Initially, Taka, Fuji, and Ankh believed they were referring to Ankh, but the brothers were actually discussing the gigantic monster. Ankh takes a bathroom break to collect himself and regain his mental composure. Edgar and his brother continue praising Yusuke, revealing him as their mentor. Hearing this, Taka and Fuji attempt to coax Ankh out of the bathroom, but he remains unresponsive and indifferent. They wait briefly for Ankh to emerge, but eventually return to continue watching the memory. After escaping danger, Ankh uses some previously accumulated spell cards to destroy the first anti-magic bird. The second bird notices Yusuke and charges to attack. Tsundere girl comes to Yusuke's rescue, shooting down the bird and frying it with the scabbard she obtained from Edgar earlier. After removing him from the danger zone, she fires a few more shots to grab his attention. Fujimiya asks Ankh to explain the nature of the anti-magic birds. Ankh reveals that these birds emit a foul odor from their mouths, which irritates the spirits and prevents magic usage. After attempting magic again without success, Ankh returns to the front lines. He finds Alicia being chased by her hypnotized brothers and the little girl from earlier. The monster appears to be enjoying Alicia's suffering. Ankh joins the fight and receives some healing during the confrontation. As they escape their deranged companions, Ankh inquires if Alicia can use any special healing techniques. Upon her negative response, Ankh picks up the wand and activates it, creating 2 yellow light cages that trap himself, Alicia, and the others. He encourages Alicia to attempt breaking the hypnosis. She rises and chants incantations using her holy magic, successfully undoing the hypnotic spell. The monster attempts to to attack her, but Alicia shocks everyone by using Edgar's punching technique, delivering a powerful blow. Alicia becomes the hero of the night, but the battle isn't over. The hypnosis monster retreats and summons flaming hell beasts to obstruct its enemies. Edgar and his group now face ferocious, hungry beasts. Just as the battle is about to begin, Unk regains his magic and uses it to inflict significant damage on the crazy dogs. Edgar and his companions are left to simply watch Unk's magical destruction of the beasts. After dealing with the beasts, they begin cleaning up the aftermath of the attack. While discussing the incident with the inn's owner, Unk repairs the wall with a barrier and provides the owners with a new screen to enjoy the sunset. Edgar tests the barrier's strength and is impressed by its resilience. Unk then removes the memory feed, noting it becomes mundane from that point. Taka praises his performance and requests the remainder of the story. Hearing this, Unk initiates the next memory recap. Following the fight, Yusuke returns to the hot spring, enjoying a moment of solitude. Alicia unexpectedly appears, dressed in wet lingerie, and joins him. During their interaction, Alicia nearly reveals herself completely, causing Unk to get a nosebleed. Fujimiya assists him before continuing the playback. Alicia, now properly dressed, apologizes for the embarrassing moment and provocatively asks if Unk is interested in young girls. Surprisingly, Unk reveals he's actually slightly younger than Alicia. When she does the calculations, she confirms his statement. She briefly panics, but quickly realizes she might be overthinking the situation. Considering her birthday's potential inaccuracy, she acknowledges she could be younger than initially thought. Unk inquires about her uncertainty, and Alicia explains she has no memories before age 9. Intrigued, Unk suggests using Icarus Elrond to explore her past memories. Upon doing so, they discover a young Alicia rescued by 3 knights after an encounter with goblins. The only item she possesses is an old map. Despite years of searching, they found no trace of Alicia's family. Eventually, a priestess from Adelcia adopted her and raised her like a nun until that point. After reviewing Alicia's memories, Unk pauses the playback and asks if she loves these memories. Alicia reveals she treasures these memories eternally and tries to enjoy every moment before she dies. This guilt trips Unk into revealing his own secret. He introduces the Icarus memory erasing spell and admits to erasing her memories multiple times. Shocked, Alicia demands to know what memories he's removed. Yusuke explains the 2 occasions he erased her memories and promises never to do so again. Alicia then confronts him about not taking credit for his remarkable achievements, like rebuilding the barrier of the sealed city. Unk dismisses this, calling himself a troublemaking person with pap for brains. He further reveals that he was actually responsible for breaking the barrier initially. His motivation was unexpected. He hoped the barrier's strong magic would react to his attack, creating a space-time distortion that might return him home. Alicia comes to understand his perspective, but makes him promise never to erase her memories again. As they continue chatting, Unk provocatively asks Alicia to go naked so he can remember her body. Embarrassed but partially compliant, she begins to expose her skin. Just then, Tsundere Girl tears through the barrier and chases Unk out of the hot springs. In the aftermath, Alicia becomes uncertain how to refer to Yusuke. Taka and Fujimiya recognize their uncle's increasingly erratic behavior and advise him to stop memory erasures to preserve his sanity. Unk suggests they learn to switch off their emotions to handle extraordinary situations. Taka quickly adopts this approach, becoming emotionally numb. Fujimiya desperately tries to bring him back to his senses, but it appears too late. A few hours later, Unk grows bored and wants to listen to a warning message on a Sega game CD-ROM. However, he needs a CD player, which Takafumi doesn't have. Yusuke becomes dramatically upset about this inconvenience. Eventually, he places the disc in his Saturn console, and the warning message plays, satisfying his curiosity. After getting his desired satisfaction, Yusuke returns to showing the kids his encounter with the singing monster. Taka and Fuji bombard him with questions, but Unk pulls up a memory screen and fast-forwards to a month after the hot spring incident. The trio listens to the haunting melody of a monster terrorizing the area. Upon hearing about the singing monster, Unk propels himself forward with magic, intending to destroy it. Just as he's about to strike, he discovers Mabel standing beneath the monster. He quickly realizes the monster is actually a large ice statue with red eyes, and Mabel is the one singing. Both are equally surprised by the unexpected encounter. Instead of scolding her, Unk speaks gently, learning that she's camping in the woods. When questioned about her job, Mabel lies, claiming she left her position and created the ice sculpture to live undisturbed forever. Unk prepares to complete his mission of eliminating her, but hesitates when Mabel promises to leave the forest quickly to avoid punishment. Slightly disappointed, he unsheathes his sword and creates a campfire around her camping area. Their conversation soon shifts to discussing Mabel's financial situation. Since Mabel can't sell the ring Yusuke gave her, he suggests she become a bard, noting her cute voice. Mabel blushes and asks him to stop making her embarrassed. Unk adds that she could make significant money with such a voice in Japan. Mabel's ears ears perk up at the mention of money, but she also feels sympathetic towards Yusuke, seeing him as lonely and lost in this world of terrible people and monsters. To help him, she offers to sing a song from his old world if he teaches her how to sing it. Unk fast forwards through the training and stops at the singing moment. When the time comes, Mabel takes a deep breath and sings the most horrendous game song imaginable. Takafumi and Fujimiya, expecting a remarkable performance, become utterly disappointed by their uncle's choice of song, a robotic arcade game tune. After singing, Unk falls asleep on Mabel's lap. She then sings another game song. During her performance, warriors from the capital track down the orc and launch an ambush. Tsundere Girl handles the attackers and watches Mabel and Unk singing. Yusuke pulls down the screen to show another memory recap of himself taking a break and checking the name of a heroine from a game he loved in his younger days. He discovers he's been misspelling the name, missing a letter. Unk becomes dramatically upset, even crying over this revelation. After attempting to hide his depression for hours, Unk resigns to sulking. Fujimiya tries to console him, saying it's not a big deal to get a name wrong. Unk then reveals that Tsundere Girl had emphasized to him the importance of names. Taka and Fuji prompt Unk to show them what happened after that night. Unk pulls up another memory screen. Tsundere Girl expresses her frustration with Unk's carefree and seemingly thoughtless behavior, complaining about his tendency to casually interact with other girls and ignore her. They end up in an argument where Unk unexpectedly reveals his full name. Hearing his name for the first time, Tsundere Girl blushes and attempts to confirm its spelling. Unk obliges, inadvertently charming her even more. She was already deeply invested in her feelings for him. After sharing his name, Unk asks her to reveal her own. Shy at first, she eventually discloses her incredibly long name, Suzalgirezagalnelvzagalriagrenzelga Elga. Finding the name impossibly complex, Unk shortens it to Sui. Sui initially resists the abbreviation, feeling it disrespects her family name. However, after Yusuke explains the meaning behind the name, she eventually accepts it with a lengthy giggle. Taka and Fujimiya celebrate, believing Unk has finally won the girl's heart. Moments later, Mabel arrives requesting breakfast. Sui pets her for a while before they visit the old Jado shrine. Yusuke pulls up a recap of Mabel's previous night's singing, much to her embarrassment. They continue discussing various topics until Unk approaches the shrine and destroys it with scorching fire, inadvertently releasing a raging holy magic monster hiding beneath. Just as a major battle was about to commence, Taka and Fujimiya reminded Unk about the traditional belief of dire consequences from destroying a shrine. Unk revealed he intentionally destroyed the shrine to potentially trigger something significant that might transport him home. Surprised by this revelation, Taka and Fujimiya become curious about the timing of the raging holy magic monster's appearance. They then discover Unk had already destroyed 2 previous shrines alongside the current one. Before losing their appetite, Unk continues the video playback. After an initial attack, the holy raging magic monster returns to normal and begins resurrecting dead animals. Mabel and Sui simultaneously attack the monsters, but they remain undefeated. As Unk approaches the dogs, a blast from the holy raging magic hypnotizes him, turning him against the girls. He releases a massive fire dragon that destroys half the field's vegetation. Mabel fortunately manages to save Sui. As Unk prepares for a second attack, Alicia and her companions arrive to intervene. Edgar punches Unk in the stomach, while Alicia protects the girls and subsequently heals him. In a desperate attempt to rescue Unk from body manipulation, Alicia risks her own life. Momentarily, she glimpses Yusuke's memories and begins to discuss them upon returning to normal. However, before she can fully explain the memories she witnessed, Unk rises and starts mumbling incoherently. Suddenly, he snaps out of his horrific state and releases the blazing dragon from its containment. The blazing fire dragon absorbs all the healing energy from the holy monster. With this accomplished, Unk and the others can now focus on destroying the blazing fire dragon. What Unk failed to consider was the blaze dragon's potential for becoming dangerously overpowered. If unchecked, it could not only incinerate them upon contact, but also hypnotize and control them like puppets. The million-dollar question: how would Unk slay such a powerful enemy? True to form, his low-intelligence brain offers no solution, leaving him silent like a deaf person with nothing to say. In a desperate attempt to salvage the situation, he points to Mabel, suggesting they could use her god-freezing ice sword to defeat the blaze dragon. Unbeknownst to them, Mabel was already paralyzed by fear. Edgar grows increasingly anxious, repeatedly pressing Yusuke to devise a plan or face certain doom. Mabel continues her futile attempts to appear relevant, wasting time with nonsensical babbling. Finally, Sui, Tsundere Girl, intervenes with a coherent strategy. She proposes infusing her ancient sword with Yusuke's magic and launching a concentrated attack to slay the dragon before it can regenerate. As the group raises questions, Sui explains that her forehead gem can protect her from mental attacks. For the dragon's fire breath, they can use magic as a defensive shield before engaging the monster directly. Since Unk, Orc Face, has previously slain a blazing dragon, Sui determines that Mabel and her overhyped ice sword are unnecessary for this mission. Alicia pulls Yusuke aside to reveal she hasn't told her brothers about the previous Goblin Horde incident. Yusuke reassures her it's not an issue. Instead, he focuses on the image he erased when she was naked, requesting her to recreate it so he won't forget. Alicia becomes deeply embarrassed and ultimately refuses. Before she can explain her refusal, Sui interrupts, calling everyone to make unnecessary introductions. Her goal is to prevent Alicia from continuing her conversation with Yusuke. After a lengthy the 3-minute introduction featuring Mabel as the central figure, the situation turns serious as the monster approaches its final regeneration stage. Sui instructs everyone to remain calm and quiet, waiting for the monster to complete its regeneration before launching their attack. When the moment arrives, she begs Unk to carry her on his shoulders for their joint aerial assault. Initially hesitant, Unk eventually decides to hold sway with his chains, treating her almost like a piece of trash. Mabel struggles to avoid the monster's gaze, initially reluctant to contribute anything. Ultimately, she accepts her role as bait to facilitate the other's attack. The monster hurls a rock at her that would have been fatal had Alicia not swooped in and saved her using another character's technique. With the bait successfully in place, Unk and Sui prepare to strike from behind. Initially, Sui was hesitant and unwilling to risk her life. Unk provides a motivational pep talk that reinvigorates her determination. They pause to strategize while the others narrowly avoid destruction by the dragon's furious attacks. After exchanging a few ego-boosting remarks, they finally focus. Just before the battle begins, Taka pauses the video to prepare himself for what he anticipates will be an epic parallel world fantasy battle. Unk offers him coffee and biscuits to enjoy during what he promises will be the best battle of his life. Resuming the playback, Unk reveals the battle's details. He and Sui leap into the sky, skillfully dodging the dragon's breath and approaching closer to their target. Once near enough, Unk infuses his magic into the sword, amplifying its power 100-fold. Sui unleashes her ultra-distance cosmic breaker, a massive cosmic beam that obliterates the blaze dragon into tiny fragments. The entire battle concludes in merely a minute. Sui collapses and falls to the ground, but Unk catches her. Upon waking, she reveals it was all a prank. She gazes adoringly into his eyes, grateful her plan worked perfectly with Unk's help. At this point, Unk carries her intimately, holding her close to his body as they gently descend to the ground. Sui enjoys her moment in the sky with Unk until he ruins the mood by smelling her and commenting that she smells like smoke. Offended, Sui wrestles to break free from his grasp. Upon reaching the ground, Unk stores the power of the blazing dragon combined with the raging holy magic. He expresses hope that the power might somehow escape, giving him another opportunity to destroy it and potentially create a portal back to his home. Mabel and the others arrive to congratulate them on surviving their ordeal. Mabel attempts to appear heroic by seeking recognition for her earlier assistance. Unk humbly bows his head, thanking her for her help. He similarly acknowledges the contributions of the other team members. Continuing his playful mood, Unk picks up Alicia and launches her into the sky, allowing her to experience flying. He then takes the boys on a similar aerial adventure before returning to the ground. Unk approaches Mabel to express gratitude for the memorable night they shared previously. As a token of appreciation, he presents her with a second ring, hoping she can sell it whenever she needs money. By this point, Sui has become extremely irritated with Unk for his close interaction with Mabel. Just when Sui thinks Unk can't surprise her further, he reveals his real name, Shibazaki Yusuke, to both Alicia and Mabel. Enraged, Sui approaches and beats him for casually sharing his name. During the commotion, the bottle containing the dragon falls. Sui asks Unk about his plans for the bottle. He explains he intends to nurture the dragon, making it stronger so he can destroy it again and create an even larger space-time rift. This revelation drives Sui to become more violent, attempting to destroy his plans so she can keep him around permanently. Unk concludes by mentioning he finally obtained a clue that might help him return home. Fujimiya tries to learn more about the clue, but Taka stops her, suggesting Unk is too boring to have exciting stories left. As hunger sets in, Unk decides to treat them to ramen. He takes the kids to an upscale ramen restaurant where they enjoy the best ramen of their lives. On their way home, Taka reflects on his experiences with Unk and Fujimiya over the past 10 months. Upon arriving home, they discover a memory recap screen opened by the spirit of memory, eager to show the kids what happened afterward. Surprisingly, Unk was arrested and thrown in jail for the most trivial of reasons. To this day, no one understands why.